Isaac Newton, the father of modern science, the man of logic and reason, the architect of our understanding of the cosmos. This is the man they taught you about. But this is a lie. His greatest obsession wasn't physics. It was finding the exact date of the end of the world. For Newton, science and magic were not enemies. They were one and the same, tools to decipher the mind of God. He believed the universe was a divine cryptogram, and he, Isaac Newton, was the chosen one to solve it. In this video, we will unseal Isaac Newton's secret vaults and reveal his forbidden writings on alchemy and apocalyptic prophecy. If you want to know the true, shocking mission of the greatest scientist in history, subscribe now and join the Decoding. To understand the depths of Newton's secret life, we must first appreciate the towering legend he built in public. The Isaac Newton of history is a monument of pure intellect, a man who seemed more like a force of nature than a mere mortal. Born prematurely on Christmas Day in 1642, he was so small he could have fit inside a quart mug. No one expected him to survive. Yet, from this fragile beginning, a giant would rise. This is a Newton of the apple, a simple, almost mythical tale. He sees an apple fall from a tree, and in a flash of insight, intuits the universal law of gravitation. The same force that pulls the apple to the earth keeps the moon in orbit around it, and the planets in their silent dance around the sun. It's a perfect story, reducing the universe's complexity to a single, elegant equation. Then there is Newton the Master Light. In a darkened room at Cambridge, he takes a simple glass prism and allows a single beam of sunlight to pass through it. What emerges is a vibrant spectrum of color, the rainbow revealed. He proved that white light was not pure and fundamental, but a mixture of all the colors we can see. With his groundbreaking book, Optics, he laid the foundations for the physical study of light. And perhaps most profoundly, he gifted the world a new language to describe reality: calculus. This powerful mathematical tool, which he developed in his early 20s, allowed humanity to precisely describe motion and change for the first time. His masterpiece, the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, published in 1687 with the help of his friend Edmund Halley, is arguably the most important scientific book ever written. It set forth the laws of motion and universal gravitation, laying the groundwork for classical mechanics. The universe, once a mysterious domain of gods and spirits, was suddenly knowable, a grand clockwork mechanism governed by predictable mathematical laws. He became a pillar of the establishment, a member of Parliament, warden, and then master of the Royal Mint, where he ruthlessly pursued counterfeiters, and from 1703 until his death, the revered president of the Royal Society. Knighted by Queen and in 1705, Sir Isaac Newton was the embodiment of a new age of reason. He crafted this image carefully, a sober, empirical scientist. But this carefully constructed mask of reason hid a turbulent, secret world. A world that would have shattered his reputation and scandalized the rational world he helped to create. For nearly 200 years after his death in 1727, Newton's secret remained safe. His scientific papers were his legacy. His other writings, a vast collection of personal notes, were deemed not fit to be printed by his estate and locked away. They were a family embarrassment, a blemish on the pristine image of the great rationalist. And there they sat, gathering dust, a ticking time bomb of historical revisionism. The bomb finally detonated in July of 1936. At a Sotheby's auction in London, the collection was broken up and sold to the highest bidders. Among the buyers was the brilliant economist John Maynard Keynes. Keynes, a lifelong admirer of Newton, began to acquire these scattered papers, driven by a nagging curiosity. As he pieced the collection back together, he made a shocking discovery. The chest contained over 1 million words, painstakingly handwritten by Newton, not on physics or optics, but on a subject considered fraudulent and superstitious: alchemy. Page after page was filled with cryptic recipes, experiments involving mercury and antimony, and detailed studies of ancient alchemical texts. This was not a passing hobby. This was a lifelong, systematic, and all-consuming passion. Newton had spent decades in secret trying to create the legendary Philosopher's Stone. But Newton wasn't seeking gold in the way a common charlatan would. He wasn't driven by greed. For him, the Philosopher's Stone was something far more profound. He believed it was a key to understanding the very building blocks of creation. Alchemy, to Newton, was a sacred art, a way to replicate and accelerate the processes of nature. He believed that metals were not dead substances, but grew like a cosmic vegetable in the womb of the planet. To understand this process was to understand the divine grammar of God. He worked in secret, his laboratory fires burning through the night. He saw himself as part of a hidden lineage of initiates, stretching back to ancient Egypt. He was trying to decode their secret language, a language of serpents, doves, and green lions. He believed this was the true, ancient knowledge, a divine wisdom that had been lost to corruptions of the modern world. His alchemical quest was not about transmuting lead into gold, but about transmuting his own understanding, about purifying his soul to be worthy of receiving God's ultimate revelation. Newton's obsession with alchemy was only one part of his secret work. The other, even larger part, was theology. And just like his alchemy, his religious beliefs were heretical and dangerous. In secret, Newton rejected the doctrine of the Holy Trinity. He did not believe Jesus was God, a divine mediator, an intermediary between God and man. This belief, known as Arianism, was a crime in 17th century England. Had his views become public, he would have been stripped of all his positions and cast out from the society he dominated. This constant threat of exposure forced him deeper into a life of secrecy and fueled his paranoia. For Newton, the universe and the scriptures were two books written by the same author, God, and he believed both could be understood through the same rational methods. He looked at the cosmos not as a cold, empty void, but as the temple of God, a sacred structure designed with perfect proportion and harmony. His work on gravity and planetary motion was, in his mind, an act of reverse engineering this temple to understand the mind of the architect. But the ultimate blueprint, he believed, was the Bible itself, not as a collection of moral allegories, but as a book of facts, a literal, divine history, and, most importantly, a detailed prophecy of the future. He spent more time studying the scriptures than he ever spent on science. He learned Hebrew, he cross-referenced ancient texts, and he filled thousands of pages with his interpretations. His goal was monumental: to reconstruct a pure, uncorrupted version of Christianity, and, in doing so, to unlock the timeline of God's plan for humanity. At the heart of this quest were two specific books: the book of Daniel from the Old Testament and the book of Revelation from the New. He saw these cryptic, vision-filled texts not as madness, but as a key. They were the divine cryptogram. He was convinced that within their symbolic language, their talk of beasts, horns, and seals, God had hidden the precise schedule for the end of days. He applied the full force of his intellect, the same systematic, logical mind that had deciphered the laws of motion, to the task of cracking this final code. After decades of tireless work, hidden from the world, Isaac Newton arrived at a conclusion. He took one of his manuscripts, a simple letter, and on the back, he wrote down his momentous finding. He had calculated the date for the apocalypse. But this was not some wild guess. It was a result of a lifetime of mathematical, historical, and theological scholarship. The date he landed on was 2060. But Newton's prophecy was not what you might think. He was not predicting a fiery end to the planet. In his private papers, he wrote explicitly, "It may end later, but I see no reason for its ending sooner." This was not a date of destruction, but of transition. For Newton, 2060 would mark the beginning of the end. It would usher in a period of war, plagues, and chaos, culminating in the triumphant return of Christ and the establishment of a 1,000-year kingdom of God on earth. He was calculating the start of a divine age. His method was rooted in a principle he found in the scriptures themselves: the day for a year principle. Prophetic passages that mention a number of days, he reasoned, were actually referring to years. His entire system depended on finding a reliable historical starting point from which to begin the countdown. He settled on the year 800 AD. This was the year the Frankish king, Charlemagne, was crowned emperor in Rome by Pope Leo III, uniting much of Western Europe and, in Newton's view, establishing the power of what he called the Great Apostasy, or the corrupt Church of Rome. From this starting point, Newton applied the prophetic timelines. The book of Daniel and the book of Revelation both speak of a period of a time, times, and half a time, or 1,260 days. Using his day-for-a-year principle, Newton converted this to 1,260 years. He added 1,260 years to his starting date of 800 AD. The result was the year 2060. He performed dozens of other calculations using different prophetic periods from the scriptures, and to his astonishment, many of them pointed to the same general time frame. To him, this was not coincidence. It was divine confirmation. This was a hidden symmetry of God's plan, revealed through mathematics. So, who was Isaac Newton? Was he the first modern scientist, a beacon of pure reason? Or was he a heretical mystic, obsessed with ancient magic and apocalyptic visions? The answer is that he was both. And perhaps the distinction doesn't matter. The economist John Maynard Keynes, who rescued Newton's secret papers from obscurity, put it best. In a 1942 essay, he wrote, "Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians, the last of the Babylonians and Sumerians, the last great mind which looked out on the visible and intellectual world with the same eyes as those who began to build our intellectual inheritance rather less than 10,000 years ago. We try to force Newton into a box, science or religion, logic or magic. But these are our modern boxes, not his. He lived in a world where these things were not yet separate. For him, they were all strands of the same sacred rope, leading to the same ultimate truth. His physics was not a rejection of God. It was a method of worshiping him. His alchemy was not a superstition. It was a spiritual exercise. And his prophetic calculations were not a delusion. They were the ultimate purpose of his life's work. All of it, the laws of motion, the nature of light, the search for the philosopher's stone, and the date of the apocalypse, was part of a single, magnificent, and all-consuming quest to read the mind of God. He looked at the heavens and the scriptures and believed he could find the fingerprints of the Creator. His true obsession wasn't simply to understand how the universe worked, but why it worked. He was searching for the final answer to the ultimate question, a certainty about God's final plan that consumed him until the very end. The pristine monument of reason was, in reality, the last and greatest of the ancient magi. If you feel that history is deeper and more mysterious than what we're told, subscribe to Echoes in the Past and give this video a like. There are more secrets waiting in the archives, ready to be uncovered.